before we get to Islam, what are you seeing with the state of Christianity in London?
Well, it's being persecuted. We've only just had a ruling under British domestic law that you are allowed to criticize Islam because we have laws in the books, much like your civil rights legislation in America called the Equality Act, which protects every religion, race, sexuality, and disability except the crime of being a heterosexual Christian white man in my country. And until this recent ruling, our Labour government was going to establish a definition of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim bigotry, which would have, in the midst of the inquiry into the Pakistani Muslim rape gang scandal that is still going on in my country, where hundreds of thousands of white English girls were abducted, trafficked, raped, abused, and in some cases murdered by predominantly Pakistani Muslim men because they weren't Muslims and because they weren't in their ethnic in-group. In the midst of the scandal and the inquiry into that, the Labour government was going to bring in an Islamophobia definition that would have defined conversations about that as racist. They would have said that referring to the Prophet Muhammad for marrying Aisha when she was 6 as paedophilic by today's standards would itself be Islamophobic and would lead you to having a conviction for saying something offensive online or in person. And by the way, 33 people every day are arrested for making offensive statements under hate speech legislation in the UK. That's more than in Russia before they went to war with Ukraine. So we are living in a very censorious environment where Christians are being persecuted for praying silently in their head outside of abortion facilities, but Muslims can gather in the aftermath of October the 7th, before the bodies have even been counted and the bullets have stopped being fired, pray outside Downing Street and scream Allahu Akbar, and be allowed to do that every weekend and Wednesday for 2 years.
Muslim call to prayers, do you hear that blasted through any of your cities?
That is allowed in multiple, yes. We have the largest mosque in Europe, I believe, in East London, in Whitechapel. And if you go there, you will see the signs are written in Bengali, because like many of our towns and cities, Bradford, Leicester, Luton, Birmingham, Blackburn, Oldham, they are third world slums now, because the English have been pushed out of their ancestral lands, and mass Muslim migration has resulted in Islamic enclaves being set up, and so you wouldn't know the difference between walking through areas of London and being in a 7th century caliphate. There are now de facto no-go areas for women, especially unaccompanied, and Jews, of course, but also the white English who would have lived there if not mass migration being inflicted on them, and we voted against that in every election and the Brexit referendum since 1974, and have been rewarded with record levels of third world migration anyway. In that area of Tower Hamlets, Whitechapel, by the way, you'll be amused, the local council are run by a progressive party called Aspire. Pretty much all of the local councillors are ethnically Bangladeshi, who are currently running to be MPs, members of parliament, for the Bangladeshi Nationalist Party back in their home country while sitting as councillors in London. Why we're allowing that beats me.
Wow, I'm not bemused. I chuckle, but that's because I've never heard of such a thing. I've heard of in Zohran Mamdani's election, there was a Get Out the Vote campaign that was run by this Pakistani activist group that operated in Pakistan and in America. But that was like behind the scenes Get Out the Vote. I've never heard of anyone running for office in 2 different countries. Is that what you just said? Is that right?
Yes, that is true. We also have a Muslim vote organisation that organised various independent candidates at the last election and got 4 Muslim MPs elected as independents on a pro-Gaza platform. What Palestine has to do with Great Britain since 1948 beats me, but they are obsessed with that rather than the rubbish piling up in cities like Birmingham where their constituencies are. These particular MPs have denied the idea that the Pakistani Muslim grooming gang scandal has anything to do with their faith or their ethnicity. They said it's a far-right narrative, despite them being overrepresented in the statistics by factors of 2 to 3 as a percentage of the population. Even in the sample sizes where academics are denying that this is going on, they have been 80% of the perpetrators of group-based child sexual exploitation, and yet this Muslim vote organisation, these MPs, continue to deny this. This Muslim vote organisation has been linked with a now prescribed jihadist group called Hizb ut-Tahrir, Sharia, who lobbied the government to stop monitoring Islamic extremist terrorism ever since 2008. They have also been linked with the Muslim Council of Britain, who in 2015, the British government found that they were run and set up by the Muslim Brotherhood, but for some reason didn't ban them or the Muslim Brotherhood. And the current Secretary General, who was campaigning for the Islamophobia definition I mentioned earlier, had previously told a room full of Muslims that the goal is to raise generation of Saladin after Saladin after Saladin in Britain until the native Christian population don't know what to do. So they're very open about the fact that this is a jihadist political takeover for a foreign religion to benefit foreign countries. And yeah, our government, our civil service, our police do nothing about it. Instead, they crack down on the people who speak about it online.
Okay. So child rape gangs aside, and I know that's a big thing to put aside, what about your regular law-abiding Muslims from Pakistan who want to live a better life in the United Kingdom? What's wrong with that? Why is that a problem in your eyes?
Multiple reasons. First of all, there hasn't been a long history of Islam in Britain, and so Islam did not build Britain. And so much like if you load a different software onto a phone with different hardware, it just doesn't work. It doesn't reproduce the same country at the end of it. Secondly, it's almost impossible to have a common law legal system and one which relies on the individual conscience and a high level of public trust if you break up the ethnic homogeneity and the Christian faith of the country. Because people from these regions, and I encourage people to read an academic called Patrick Nash's work on this, have high levels of cousin marriage. In areas of Pakistan, including the clans who have been imported into cities in Britain, it's up to 80%. And that means it's not just high levels of birth defects, low levels of intelligence, lower levels of impulse control, but if you're literally marrying your cousins, it's hard to extend moral consideration outside of your family, your clan, and your ummah. And this is actually a concept in Islam called asabaya. It means clannish loyalty, and it's because in the 7th century, when Muhammad moved from Mecca to Medina and stumbled across Arab and Jewish tribes, he mapped Islam onto the existing tribal structure. It's why there's an Arabist who wrote in the 70s a quite flattering book on Islam called Alfred Guillaume, but he said that it's unlike in Christianity, where we respect the law of the land as that which is Caesar's and hold to our faith in our hearts as that which is God's, quote, nothing comes between an Arab and his own. So there is open sedition, a parallel legal system in Britain. We are now the Western capital for Sharia courts, which have unregulated marriages, including child marriages, and a recreation of the conditions of the failed Muslim countries that people have come from in our country. And it should be quite simple, really. It's because countries are not just magical entities. They are the consequence of people acting in groups under the direction of a given culture. And so if those people are allowed to move as a big group into a new country and practice their culture there, then they don't become like the country they've moved to. That country becomes like the country that they've left. And so even if they are law-abiding, even if they don't commit terror attacks or participate in the rape gangs, and unfortunately many Pakistanis knew that it was going on. The head of the Ramadan Foundation in 2016 said, British Pakistanis know this is happening, but bury their heads in the sand because they don't want to be seen as siding with, quote, the white enemy. But even if they don't do those heinous crimes, just by practicing their culture, it doesn't reproduce my country and my culture. And so it's just not welcome here.
I've never heard it said better. We see it happening in America, even recently with the election for the mayor of Minneapolis. And we had the white guy running, incumbent, and then we had the Somali guy. And the Somali guy ended up losing, but it turns out he lost because of the ancient blood clan feuds. He was a member of some clan tribe, and the white guy who was the mayor was campaigning for these other Somalis in this other clan to vote against this other clan. So we had ancient blood clan rivalries playing out in the Minneapolis mayor's race. And real quick on the Pakistani point, and then I got one last overall question for you. Was it the BBC recently? Not BBC, NHS, who came out recently and said that cousin marriage is good because it promotes strong family ties and unity. And it was the BBC, I believe, who admitted that even 55% of British Pakistanis marry within the family up to their first cousins. Is that true?
Yeah, that sounds about right. The BBC actually championed it by saying, well, there are lower levels because it's gone down from 60% to about 40%. I mean,
Oh,
yippee,
great.
thank you, state broadcaster, for celebrating that. But one of those four independent MPs in Parliament got up and defended cousin marriage against a bill to ban it, because we banned it all the way back with the first Archbishop of Canterbury. It was only Henry VIII that repealed it, but we had very low levels of cousin marriage in the general population throughout our history, unlike the Muslim world. He got up and defended it with the same argument, saying, well, there are lots of people from Africa and the Middle East and the Indian subcontinent who practice this to, keep it in the family and make sure money stays within the family. And it's like, yeah, I bet they do, but we just don't do that here. We think it's disgusting. We see that it is incompatible with our individualistic Christian morality, and so we want to ban it. Thank you very much. But of course, the cowardly Labour government in this country doesn't want to offend their Pakistani vote farms, and so they didn't bring the bill forward.